I don't agree with some of women's dating advice from other women. I agree with what you're saying, although there's advice in here I've never heard. I don't mind drinks for a first date, and in Europe this is pretty much the standard. Fun alternatives are walks and museums. I definitely believe we shouldn't go for low-effort men, but that's more so on the small things, the daily little efforts and thoughtfulness. I want someone who will be emotionally present and remembers what I tell them and what is important to me. That, for me at least, has nothing to do with money. My advice would be to do what feels right to you. Date people who you vibe with similar interests and fun personalities. A shorter date means that you can give yourself the time to determine whether you like the other person enough to go on a longer date with them for the second one, and it also just lets both persons decide whether they like the other person without being over the top. To me, someone who throws money at it might actually be a red flag. All I'd say is to initially try and match with someone based on finding them physically attractive, as well as having common interests. From there you can build a solid foundation of conversation and arrange a nice, simple date that doesn't require anyone to break the bank, i.e. getting a hot drink ice cream and walking around a nice park, or an activity you both enjoy followed by a meal. That way, you also get to see if they are nice to retail waitstaff, and whether or not they are able to make small purchases on a whim without having to and ah about it. During which you can ask each other about your careers, ambitions, and relationship goals, which shouldn't be taboo topics to pick up. If these line up with you, then fantastic, you can keep going. The last hurdle to overcome at that point is intimacy. My personal recommendation is, if the topic is brought up, say that you would prefer to wait until you feel comfortable before being physical with someone. Their response to this should be positive and understanding. If they are negative or pushy, even in a jokey way, they will just want one thing. Hope this helps. I'm sensing entitlement and lack of self-awareness. Shop within your price range. Most of us are average but want the top 10. Don't confuse your fairytale someday my prince will come with reality. There is no man that is going to fit your fantasy requirements. However, there are plenty of good imperfect men that will make great life mates. Don't listen to advice on this. Advice is like the news, so skewed to get attention, but really just a lot of useless junk that only hurts people. From the brief bit I read so far, it seems those women are more about having things paid for them with no romantic strings attached. No real relationship, just expensive dates for the clout and ego and possibly social media. And that's just sad, really. And to expand on that sort of advice, also try to limit the amount of advice you take on men from women. Just as many men don't know all about women, the same applies to women about men. Edit. And anyway, just try and get to know someone first. Worry less about dates and more about knowing them, and then knowing you. However long that takes, then once you're itching to spend time together, go out someplace and see if how things may be affected by that. But before physical attraction, before money and any sort of game, you have to know and like the person. Otherwise, what's the point? Then it doesn't become too different, in my eyes, from what the other women do. Just a matter of degree. There is definitely a growing subculture of women who are fully buying into their own commodification as a guy of normal means. Women holding attitudes like the ones you describe would not get past my filter, like I would not get past theirs, because I'm not looking for a sex worker to buy attention and sex from. I'm not blaming these women for behaving like this, though sadly too many guys reward this behavior with their own attention and money and time. I think it's best to keep relationships to yourself and only let them know the things you want them to know. Friends can destroy a relationship. I went on a first date with a guy to a lookout spot. Basically like you park the car and there's a beautiful view of the mountains where we live. And we just talked. No money was spent. The second date he bought me dinner. Third date I bought dinner. I feel like money shouldn't have a lot to do with high or low effort. He has shown me a lot of effort in different ways. For example, rearranging his schedule to make time for me. I think people who want really expensive dates or want to be catered to are being unrealistic and setting themselves up for failure, tbh. I would much rather be respected by a man who makes a normal amount of money than give up any respect and power in a relationship to get my nails paid for. I can pay for my own nails. It's just backlash to the extreme casualness and disrespect that women have come to receive in the dating sphere in Western culture over the last few decades. See, rise of the situationship. Just cherry pick what makes sense to you and leave the rest. Though I personally prefer a first date to be a dinner date, I totally get the coffee date and wanting to dip within the hour. I don't think either necessarily sets you up for low effort. I don't expect anyone to go extravagant on the first date, especially because we won't know for sure if we're a good match. Some people do it and that's completely fine, but there may be time you may come across a man that accepts something from you afterwards. What a person expects out of you on a date says a lot about their goals and who they are as a person. The advice we give here on Reddit, the advice you get from your friends tells you a lot about our perspective, nothing more. There is no iron-bound rule set. My advice as a man dating would be to write in your intro honestly what do you expect from a man. Other women's advice often means what they would like for themselves, and women as men are not clones, people have different expectations. As men, I am always bothered with profiles with not enough details or not at all, pictures mean nothing or not so much. Believe me, it telling more about what you want would keep away some people and attract more those who are into your style. It doesn't mean you won't receive answers from men who don't know how to read or who try their chance no matter what. But at least it's a first filter. For example, I am neither rich nor poor, but when I see the keyword generous, I read golden digger. Also, when I see independent woman, it's a good sign, because I like to deal with women who are independent emotionally and financially and treat men as their equals. It's not sure, but it's a hint. Good luck in your dating adventures. Wow, it's almost like each woman has their own standards, flags, and such. Is there anyone giving good dating advice for women who just want to date someone normal and compatible with me? Jordi Agnesens, Therapijif, Dating.intentionally, Estabrella Official. You don't have to follow other people's advice. On the inverse of all of your examples, I feel that as a man I have to achieve an unachievable level of perfection to be considered a viable option. Obviously it's not true, but it feels that way, as if women's expectations are higher than they've ever been. And I'm not talking about personality expectations, more the physical ones like looks, salary, career, etc. In my experience, girls give the most useless dating advice to guys. For girls, I suspect most of the advice givers are either washed up 30-yo or bitter 20-yo who just made repeated bad choices in men. I agree with you, but when it comes to coffee dates, I don't have time for that shit. Either am going out and eating a meal or why am I leaving my house? It takes way too much for me to get ready for a date to have it possibly end 20 minutes in. A dinner date is only an hour and makes the most sense to be able to get to know the person better than how they take their coffee. Seeing what people chose to eat, how they treat waitstaff. If they offer to pay, split, these things tell a lot about a person. It seems like you might be navigating to toxic places if you're hearing advice like that. Those are the equivalent of PUA advice, but for women instead of men.